Okay, it's Sunday, which means against my better judgment, it's time to go to Reddit and see what we can find in this hive of scum and villainy. So I've been to the Overwatch University subreddit ahead of time and just scraped all the questions off the first couple pages, and we're gonna answer the questions. Why is Dragon Ball FighterZ playing in the background if we're talking about Overwatch? Look, I didn't know this was a no fun allowed zone, okay? I'm sorry. If you're wondering which side I'm on, just look for whichever one started with Android 21. So let's start with an easy one. Can Meteor Strike clear Hammond's minefield? Yes, it can, because Doomfist... Well, I mean, it does damage, so yes, it will. But Doomfist will also not die while he's doing it, because he is invulnerable after he... It does the damage, and he's still invulnerable for a second afterwards, so yes, it can. Next up is, just how do you play D.Va? And basically the person was, felt very lost because they felt like D.Va could do a lot of things, and basically they were kind of overwhelmed with what they were trying with all the things they could do, pretty much, or were supposed to be doing. And pretty much, like, D.Va can do a bit of everything. It kind of depends on, like, what your team comp is versus the enemy team comp, because if you're playing with a dive comp, so you know you're doing, like, Winston, D.Va, dive comp kind of stuff, then basically you're just going in with Winston and trying to make it easier for Winston to dive in on people. If you can kill people, great, but you're basically just looking to play around Winston as much as possible. You don't really worrying about, like, peeling for people or anything at that point, because it's not... A dive comp's usually not going to be super concerned about that kind of stuff. Like, there's a backliner usually not having to worry too much, because the goal is you're pressuring their team too much for your backline to have to worry about it. If you're playing with, like, a more stationary comp, so like Rhine, D.Va, McCree, Genji, something like that, a little bit more stationary, a little more static, then at that point you're looking more to peel for your teammates and deal with the flankers, because that's just kind of like what the off-tank usually does. They're usually the ones worrying about flankers and peeling for the backline, because the main tank is more preoccupied with the front line, so the off-tank worries about that kind of stuff. So with that kind of situation, you're worrying a little bit more about it. It does depend on, like, the enemy team comp as well, because the enemy team comp might be something like McCree Soldier, as like Rhine Zarya, McCree Soldier, Ana Zen, something like that. Then your backline are never really gonna be getting flanked unless Soldier or McCree are doing something weird, but you can just kind of assume they'll probably not get flanked. So at that point, you're not worrying about peeling anymore, because you shouldn't have to, unless, like, Rhine gets into your team or something like that. You're worrying more about just helping Reinhardt and, like, trying to contest, like, the high ground and stuff like that at that point, because D.Va's also good at contesting high ground. Something that's a very high priority for me whenever I play D.Va is D.Va's very good at jumping on a person and killing them very quickly, because she does a lot of burst damage. So I spend a lot of time looking for people that are out of position, or just people that are overextending ever so slightly. Like, if somebody's up on high ground by themselves, somebody's just kind of out in the open, I'll jump on them and try to kill them, because D.Va does, like, a big amount of burst right at the start, right as she jumps on someone, because you go in, missiles going, left clicking, you bash into them physically with your body. She does a lot of damage, so I spend a lot of time looking for people who are out of position, just to try and, like, kill them, pretty much. D.Va does a lot of burst damage. She's very good at punishing people who are out of position. And that's kind of it. Like, you kind of just basically depends on what your team comp is. D.Va can do a lot of things, but you're never really going to be in a position where you need to worry about all the things she can be doing at the same time. So you want to just kind of analyze the situation and think, alright, with what's going on right now, you know, what do I have to worry about? What feasibly could the enemy team do? And then what feasibly can my team do as well? And then based off that, I'm going to narrow my list of jobs down to what is applicable right now. So there you go. That's about what I got for you. Next up was, how do you play DPS? And this wasn't like, how do you play them, like, in-game? It's how do you get to play DPS, because people just insta-lock DPS and all that. And this person specifically was saying they always felt to tank, and it felt like they were basically always playing things that they hate so that other people can play things they enjoy, which usually meant filling onto, like, Reinhardt, which is exactly how I ended up playing Reinhardt for, like, 8 seasons. No one wanted to pick Reinhardt, so I guess I'm gonna be picking Reinhardt then, aren't I? Because nobody else wants to. So, you're never gonna get to play what you want to play if you just always give in, like, you're always the first one to bow, right? Like, if you want to play DPS, real talk, just insta-lock DPS and just play the DPS, okay? Like, as long as your team comp isn't something like 6 DPS, realistically, you can probably still win. I see one tank, 1 healer, 4 DPS win more often than people say it wins. I see 5 DPS, 1 healer win more often than people say it wins. Like, it's not impossible for a bad team comp to beat a good team comp. As long as you're playing well, like, in the end, it should roughly break even, and you should still end up climbing anyway, as long as you're playing well. So, really, just, like, pick the DPS. Just, like, insta-lock the DPS and stick to it. Don't just give in to people, pretty much. People worry a lot about the team comp. Like, they get into their head that, like, you just can't win if you don't have, like, the 2-2-2 comp, or you can't win if you've got 3 DPS, you can't win if you got 4 DPS. Dude, I see it happen all the fucking time. I've seen bad team comps win so much. You really, like... It's not, unfortunately, as simple as us just going, well, if you've got 2-2-2, you've got good chances of winning, because tragically, more comes down to it in the game. So, if you want to play DPS, dude, just insta-lock the DPS and, like, get on with it, pretty much. You know, if your team comes, if it's, like, looking like 6 people are gonna pick DPS, at that point, it's time to pick a healer, pretty much. I find that's not usually the issue, though. Like, I don't find it's that hard to get a healer. The hard thing is usually getting a tank. People don't like playing tanks. People don't really like playing healers a lot of the time either, but I find more people are willing to play healer than there are people willing to play tank. That's just my experience anyway. Anecdotal, right? So, but if you want to do it, dude, just do it. Pretty much. Next up was, should I learn Ana/Zenyatta or Mercy/Lucio? And you should learn Ana/Zenyatta if we're just talking strictly about which grouping, which 2 heroes have the best chance of winning, because Ana and Zen are just better than Mercy and Lucio most of the time. Ana just has so much utility that it's hard to compete. She's got a lot of utility, and utility in most competitive, like, team-based games, utility is very important. Just competitive games in general, utility is really important. Even like this game, utility is important. You might not be able to tell from just, like, watching the kaleidoscope of visual effects, but, like, utility is actually important in all games still. So Ana's really good for that. Zen's really good because Discord makes your teammates actually do damage, even if they're bad at doing damage, and Transcendence is really good. Mercy and Lucio, like, if you're really good at Lucio, you can make shit work, right? Like, Lucio, if you're really good at Lucio, Lucio is a crazy hero. The caveat is just that you've got to be really good at Lucio, though, unfortunately, right? And Mercy is just flatly not as good as Ana is. As far as I'm concerned, like, as well, for Mercy Lucio, you've set... Because Ana Zen, it looks like the person wants to go 1 main healer, 1 off healer, basically. As far as I'm concerned, Mercy's an off healer at this point. Her healing is so low, and, like, the biggest utility she has is just, damage boost, basically, and res, but depending on what your teammates do, you might never even get to use res. So, as far as I'm concerned, Mercy's an off healer at this point. She can't compete with Ana even a little bit. Like, Ana's just got so much going for her compared to Mercy. Which is funny when you think about right after Mercy got her rework, right? When it was like, damn, Mercy's got it all, Ana's got nothing. funny how times change like that, isn't it? So, if we're talking strictly on which heroes, like, are more likely to get you wins, pick Ana and Zen. If we're talking about which heroes you wanna play, just, if you like Mercy and Lucio more than you like Ana and Zen, just play them, dude. There's no reason you can't, climb playing, Mercy and Lucio. It's just, it'll be harder than Ana Zenyatta. Well, Ana's harder to play, so it might be theoretically harder to carry as Ana, just because Ana's hard to play, but Ana and Zen are just better. So, there you go. Next up is, as D.Va, is it worth it to tank a Riptire for your teammates? Yes, it is, because you losing your mech is less catastrophic than somebody else losing their life. You know, ideally, you don't have to sack your mech to deal with the Riptire situation, but it's definitely way better to lose mech than someone else losing their life. You can always get another mech relatively quickly, whereas, especially depending on the map, someone dying might mean they are out of the fight for, like, almost 30 seconds, if we're talking about, Paris and... which is the other one that's really close to 30 seconds? It was one of the 2 CP maps. Temple of Anubis? One of the other 2 CP maps is really close to being a 30-second walk back from the first point. For the defending team, obviously. Like, so them dying could be them gone for 30 seconds, whereas you out of mech could be something that's rectified in less than 10 seconds. So, it's... and you might have self-destruct. You losing your mech might not even result in you losing your mech if you've got self-destruct. Because sometimes it's worth using self-destruct just to get another mech. But yes, the short answer is yes, it is worth it to tank a Riptire for your teammates. Next up was any tips for comp anxiety, and this is a problem I used to have, but now I really don't give a shit. This was something I used to have more trouble with back when I played League of Legends a long time ago. I don't give a shit there either, but I used to get really anxious about playing the competitive match modes. And the issue for me was basically I was worried about finding out I wasn't as good as I thought I was, pretty much. I didn't have the anxiety that a lot of people do, where they're kind of worried about what other people are going to say to them, because I don't really give a shit about that. But for me, it was just a matter of just forcing myself to do it enough times, and then eventually I realized, oh, this isn't actually that bad, because... eventually, I just came to the mindset that I have today, like, it's just a fucking number at the end of my name, right? Like, that's all it is. This is the same as the regular mode, but this is fucking sick visually, by the way. Like, Goku's ending, or Kid Goku's ending. Look at this shit. That's incredible. Nobody else has an ending even remotely like that. That's out of control. He's still God's mistake, though, don't worry. Anyway, so... for me, it was just a matter of being like, well, this is the same as the regular game mode, but it attaches a number to the end of my name. And the number doesn't really mean anything. Like, the number only matters as much as I let it matter. So I came to not really care that much about it. So for me, it was mostly just, like, forcing myself to doing it enough times. And then I find this is the way... I've had anxiety problems before. I find this is usually the way with anxiety. Everything just seems like it's going to be so much worse than it actually is. So once you force yourself to do it enough times, you realize, oh, it's not actually as bad as I thought it was. That was just my stupid monkey brain going, oh, well, this is actually going to be pretty much the end of your natural life now. And turns out that wasn't really the case. So that was it for me, but I was afraid of finding out that I wasn't as good as I thought I was, basically. The advice I got for you, if you're, like, afraid of what people are gonna say, you're afraid people are gonna make fun of you, you're afraid people are gonna judge you for how well you play, stuff like that, the thing to remember is just, you'll probably never see these people again. Unless you're in, very, very, very high SR, or very, very, very low SR, you are gonna play another game, and probably 95% of the time, you are not going to see anybody from the previous game in that game. You might see one or two, but you're never going to see these people again. So what they say to you in the game doesn't really matter that much, because you'll never see them again. You know, like, yeah, it's not gonna feel good if you get, like, yelled at the time. That's obviously not gonna feel great, regardless, but you will never see those people again. So, what they say to you only matters for the next 10 or so minutes. Well, more like 15 or so minutes. Really? And, you know, depending on how long you let what they say stick with you, it could be longer than that, but, like, you're never gonna see him again. Just try and bear that in mind. And, like, if you've got social anxiety, just don't bother with voice chat, dude. It doesn't matter as much as people say it does, pretty much. I'm so sad this isn't a Transformation Ultimate. Just changes back after this, so upsetting. Don't bother with the voice chat if you have, like, social anxiety. Doesn't matter. The team chat is nowhere near as important as people say it is. I got all the way up to Masters, I got halfway up Masters, and I never talked to another human being in the voice chat the entire time. Never. So it does not matter as much as people say it does. People think the voice chat is the be-all and end-all, but it really isn't. So if you have social anxiety, just try and bear in mind, you'll probably never see these people again. And they might not say anything to you anyway. You'll probably never see them again. And just don't worry about voice chat. It's not that big of a deal. So there you go. That's what I got for you on that one. Next was, how can I explain to people that Ashe is viable? And this person was, they like playing Ashe, I like playing Ashe. I've never really had this issue that they have, but they were saying people always tell them to change to Widowmaker or McCree rather than play Ashe. I've personally never had that problem. But if that's the problem you're having, this kind of applies to a few other things, because people, you know, if you try and play, like, Widowmaker, people are gonna say, oh, don't play Widowmaker, oh god, you're fucking terrible, we don't need a Widow, playing Sombra, we don't need Sombra, change off Sombra, blah, blah, blah. It kind of applies to all that kind of stuff. Basically, the way you explain to them that that character is viable is to show them that they're viable, right? Because here's my advice for you. If you're playing any kind of hero that attracts that kind of response from people, which is basically, stop playing this hero, just don't say anything to those people. And just play the game, and just show them that you know how to play the hero, and the hero is plenty viable because, well, look, I'm playing the hero right now and I'm doing just fine. And just don't say anything to them, because they are, in all likelihood, not going to change their opinion. Like, you can give them the most well-thought-out argument in the universe, you can provide them all this evidence and all these stats, but in the end, that person is probably still going to go, yeah, but we don't need Ashe. Right? Like, that's still probably what's going to happen. So just don't engage with those people. Don't get into the argument of whether or not the hero's viable. Just show them they're viable. And they're probably going to continue talking shit, like, especially as, like, the game goes on and you don't switch. Just still don't say anything to them. Just keep playing the game. Because, you know, either if you're doing well, if you're doing badly, saying anything to them is definitely not going to change their opinion, because you're doing badly right now. But if you're doing well, who the fuck cares what they think, right? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your teammates think, because you could be the greatest Widow, the greatest Ashe in the world, and you could be, like, solo killing half their team every team fight, and your teammates still probably won't acknowledge that. They'll probably still say, Widow's useless, Ashe is useless, Sombra's useless, even if you're carrying the game. But it doesn't matter what your teammates think. The people on the other team sure as fuck know what you did. And that's the thing that matters at the end of the day, isn't it? And usually, like, if people are going to talk shit about you for it, for the hero you're picking, like, oh, Widow's fucking useless, they usually go into all chat to do that. And if you're doing well, people on the other team will go, almost universally, they go, shut the fuck up, that person's carrying you. Right? That happens a lot. Because people on the other team, they know what's happening, right? They know the Widow is killing me every single fucking time I poke my face out. They know the Ashe is killing me every single time I poke my fucking face out, right? They will, in all likelihood, say, shut the fuck up, Reinhardt. Let's be honest, it's Reinhardt that's probably saying it. Shut the fuck up, Reinhardt. Shut the fuck up, Mercy. The Ashe, the Widow, is carrying you. And they will still say, lol, no they aren't. But doesn't matter what your teammates think. At the end of the day, if you're doing well, you're doing well. And the other team sure as fuck know what you did. So just don't worry about it. Don't worry about explaining to them that the character is viable. Show them the character is viable instead. Because they probably won't listen to your explanation. But if you hard carry the game, well, they've kind of got no choice but to accept that the character is at least somewhat viable, and if they still don't, well, they were never going to be convinced by anything you said anyway. So just don't worry about explaining it to them. Show them instead. And next, and this is actually the last question for this week, because there weren't really that many questions this week, to be honest with you. There were a few, like, aim-related questions that, like, I really have no input on, so I skipped over those, but this is the last question I got for you this week. And it was, is it impossible to climb as a support? And what I did want to point out about this thread specifically is it was only like one paragraph of explanation, but it was basically like, I play support, I solo queue, it's really fucking hard, I'm in plat, I'm falling down to gold, wow. The only thing they said about why specifically it's hard to climb as a support was they said, quote, everyone goes ballistic after a single criticism, causing the game to snowball to hell. And that really stood out to me because that was the only thing they said about why climbing as a support is hard. They didn't give any other reason. Because usually people will say shit like, DPS don't know what the fuck to do, it's pointless pocketing people if they can't do any damage. God, that's crazy. I don't understand how people can do that. They'll say shit like, DPS are trash, why bother pocketing someone if they can't do any damage, They'll say shit like that. I've never seen someone say that before. So and I mean, you know, perhaps me reading too much into one sentence, but it sounds to me like the person's problem might be, they start shit with their teammates. If the only reason they gave that it's hard to climb as a support is people go ballistic when you criticize them, that kind of stands out to me as like, well, why is that your pivotal thing to point out? Like, I think the person might be just starting shit, and that's why it's hard for them to climb as a support. But that might be me reading too much into one sentence in this post, but it really stood out to me. So anyway, the short answer is no, it's not impossible to climb as a support. This person was in the gold platinum range, and usually it's people that are like platinum and below that are saying it's impossible to climb as a support or very hard to climb as a support. And like, real talk, dude, if you're in plat or gold or below, you are probably making a lot of mistakes. Like, you are probably making a lot of positional mistakes. You are probably just not getting as much value out of your utilities. Like, if you're playing Mercy, you are probably not damage boosting people as much as you could be. If you're playing Ana, you are probably not using your cooldowns as effectively as you could be. Stuff like that. So, like, trust me, you're making mistakes still at that point, and you're still making mistakes all the way up. You get up to Masters, you are still making mistakes. You are just making less mistakes. So, rather than, like, this is the thing I advise you to do, is rather than worrying about how hard it is to carry as a support, just worry about the mistakes you're making instead. Like, don't worry about how hard it is for your role to carry, because that's just shit that psychs you out. Like, just worry about the mistakes you are making, because that's the shit that matters, right? You're trying to fix the mistakes you make so you play more consistently well, thereby you will climb more efficiently, right? Like, yes, it is definitely possible to carry as a support. Solo queuing doesn't matter, it is definitely possible to do so. As any of the supports, also. Like, I always say, try not to play Mercy in the low ranks, but, like, you can still do it as Mercy. You can, it just is gonna be harder than if you did as, like, Ana, probably, but you can do it. It's definitely not impossible to carry as a support. I don't really have advice to you other than that, because it's kind of a broad question. My advice is just don't worry about it. If you're a tank player as well, and you're like, it's fucking impossible to climb as a tank player, main tank or off tank, don't worry about that. Don't worry about how hard it is to carry as a support. Don't worry about how hard it is to carry as a tank. That shit don't matter. Just worry about the mistakes you're making and fix those, because you are making mistakes, and it's better to fixate on the mistakes you're making than how easy it is to climb as your role. So that's all I got for you really on that one, but yes, it is definitely possible. And look at that, wrap that one up just in time for the game to be ending. Fantastic timing. This is still insane to me, because all the other endings for characters are literally just, they're there, it like does a 3 shots, one far away, one mid, and then one close up on the person's face, and they say something. That's their ending screen. Kid Goku gets to ride fucking Shenron. So, that's pretty wild. I hope that that's something they stick with moving forward, because that's cool. The last 3 characters they've released have been, like, pretty cinematic overall. So, you know, hopefully it's not such a terrible character as fucking Dragon Ball GT Goku. God fucking damn it. We still don't have so many people. We still don't have Kefla. We still don't have Janemba. We still don't... Well, I mean, those 2 are coming. We still don't have Mr. Satan. Don't have Roshi. We still don't have so many obvious people. And yet they're going to GT. It's very upsetting to me. Even, like, fucking Super Boo, I'd be more happy with than this. Where's Bulma in a mech? Real talk. Anyway, enough about that. So, thank you very much for watching. If you did, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer. If you haven't already, you can join our Discord and ask questions more directly and have a conversation about them, or just ship posts with us. I've started streaming on Twitch Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 7 p.m. EST to 11 EST. There's a link to the channel in the description. And if you managed to make it all the way through the video and somehow still enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more content of middling quality in the future. And I hope you found the video helpful.